There's a moment in everyone's life when the ground beneath them shifts, when the sky they've always known turns a different shade. For me, that moment wasn't a car crash or a sudden illness. It was a file. A dusty, unassuming manila folder, tucked away in the very back of a forgotten box in my parents' attic. I was just looking for old photo albums, a nostalgic trip down memory lane, something innocent and comforting. What I found instead was a portal to a past so dark, so utterly shattering, that it pulverized every single memory I held dear, every foundation of my identity. My parents, the people who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who tucked me into bed and kissed away my scraped knees, they had a criminal past. And the proof wasn't hearsay, not a whispered rumor, but cold, hard police records. I remember the day vividly. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, leaves crunching underfoot as I pulled into their driveway. My mom had called, asking if I could help clear out some old boxes from the attic. Just junk really, she'd said. But too heavy for your father and me now. I'd agreed without a second thought, happy to help. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten memories. My old report cards, a box of my dad's vinyl records, my mom's wedding dress, carefully preserved. Each item was a little piece of our shared history, a quiet affirmation of a normal, loving life. I was sifting through a box labeled miscellaneous, mostly old tax documents and utility bills from decades ago, when my fingers brushed against something stiff, thicker than the paper around it. It wasn't a photo album. It was a beige folder, slightly warped, with no label on the tab. Curiosity, that insidious little worm, prompted me to open it. The first thing I saw was a mugshot. A grainy black and white photograph of a young man, looking defiant, almost angry, staring straight into the camera. My blood ran cold. It was unmistakably my father. Younger, yes, with more hair and a leaner face, but the eyes, that particular set of his jaw, it was him. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape its cage. My mind screamed, no, this can't be right. A mistake. Someone else. But the name printed underneath, in bold, stark lettering, extinguished that tiny flicker of hope. John David Miller. My father's full name. Beneath the mugshot were several pages of official-looking documents. Police reports. Court transcripts. Arrest warrants. My hands began to tremble so violently I almost dropped the folder. I forced myself to read, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon, desperate for an explanation, a contradiction. Anything that would prove this was a nightmare. But the words leaped out at me, sharp and brutal. Assault and battery. Aggravated robbery. Conspiracy. Dates from the late 1970s. My father, in his early 20s, not long before he met my mother, had been involved in what looked like a series of violent crimes. The world tilted. The musty attic air suddenly felt suffocating. I stumbled back, clutching the folder, my mind reeling. My father? A criminal? The man who lectured me about honesty, who always said the most important thing was to be a good person, who volunteered at the local soup kitchen every Thanksgiving. It was an impossible contradiction. My entire understanding of him, of our family, of my own history, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I closed the folder, shoved it back into the box, and pretended I hadn't seen it. My initial reaction wasn't curiosity, it was pure unadulterated terror. Terror of what this meant, terror of confronting it, terror of the truth. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, mechanically helping my parents, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. Every glance at my father, every casual comment he made, felt imbued with a sinister undertone. Was it always there, hidden beneath the surface, or was I projecting? I couldn't tell. I felt like an imposter in my own life, a stranger in my own home. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The mugshot haunted my eyelids, the words aggravated robbery, echoing in the silence of my bedroom. I tried to rationalize it. A youthful mistake? A wrong crowd? A misunderstanding? But the documents were too detailed, too official, too damning. The next morning, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. That folder was a Pandora's box, and I had already peeked inside. The truth, however ugly, demanded to be seen. I drove back to my parents' house under the pretense of having forgotten something. My heart pounded as I ascended the creaky attic stairs. The fear mixed with a morbid determination. This time I didn't rush. I pulled out the box, found the folder, and carried it carefully to my car. I couldn't risk them seeing it, or me with it. The secrecy, the deception, had already begun to infect me. Back in the privacy of my own home, I laid out the contents of the folder on my kitchen table. There were more documents than I remembered. A handwritten letter, crumpled and faded, from a lawyer. Newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, detailing a local crime spree. And then another name caught my eye. A name I hadn't processed in my initial panic. Sarah Jenkins. My mother's maiden name. My breath hitched. No. It couldn't be. My mother? Sweet, gentle, nurturing mom? This was beyond comprehension. I found a second mugshot, this one of a young woman with defiant eyes, a strong jawline, and a hint of a smirk. My mother. Younger, yes, but undeniably her. The same name, Sarah Jenkins, underneath. The same dates. The same charges. Assault and battery. Accessory to robbery. Suddenly, the world didn't just tilt, it imploded. Both of them? My parents, together, had been involved in these crimes? The sheer audacity of it, the depth of the deception, was a physical blow. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My parents, the pillars of my childhood, were not who I thought they were. They were criminals. The realization hit me with the force of a physical impact. My entire life had been built on a lie. Every comforting word, every loving gesture, every piece of advice, it all felt tainted, hollow. How could they have lived with this secret for so long? How could they have raised me, taught me values, knowing they had this buried past? The hypocrisy was suffocating. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, a cold anger beginning to simmer beneath the surface of my shock. I spent the next few weeks in a relentless, obsessive dive into their past. The internet became my primary tool. I started with the names and dates from the police records. It was difficult at first. These events were decades old, pre-internet saturation. But slowly, painstakingly, I pieced together fragments. Local online archives of old newspapers were a goldmine. I found articles detailing the Jenkins-Miller gang, a small group responsible for a string of armed robberies and assaults in the greater metropolitan area. The names, the dates, the descriptions matched perfectly with the documents in the folder. My parents weren't just involved, they were central figures. The articles described a daring bank robbery, a violent convenience store holdup, and several instances of assault. The details were gruesome, far removed from the sanitized version of history I'd always known. They weren't just petty thieves, they were violent offenders. One article even mentioned a police officer being injured during a chase. My father, John Miller, was identified as the ringleader in several of the incidents. My mother, Sarah Jenkins, was described as his accomplice, often acting as a getaway driver or lookout. The picture emerging was not of young, naive individuals caught in a bad crowd, but of calculating, active participants in criminal activity. The more I read, the more horrified I became. There were quotes from victims, accounts of their terror. I saw mugshots of other members of the gang, faces I didn't recognize, but whose lives were intertwined with my parents' dark history. The cases went to trial. The documents in the folder included snippets of the court proceedings. My father was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, my mother to 3. They had served time. Real time. For real, violent crimes. This wasn't a youthful indiscretion. This was a significant period of their lives, spanning several years, culminating in prison sentences. How had they managed to erase this from their narrative so completely? How had they rebuilt their lives, started a family, and lived as seemingly upstanding members of the community, without a single whisper of this past ever surfacing? It was an incredible feat of deception, a testament to their ability to bury the truth so deep, so thoroughly, that even their own child never suspected. As I absorbed each new piece of information, my perception of my childhood began to warp. Little things I'd never thought twice about, suddenly took on new meaning. My parents' strictness, for instance. They were always very particular about me being home on time, knowing exactly where I was, who I was with. At the time, I dismissed it as typical parental overprotectiveness. Now, I wondered if it was rooted in their own past, A desperate attempt to ensure I didn't follow in their footsteps. Or perhaps a fear that their past would catch up to them, or to me. There were also subtle inconsistencies, things I'd brushed off. My parents rarely talked about their lives before they met. They had a vague romanticized story of meeting at a local diner, falling in love, and starting fresh. No mention of their early 20s, no college stories, no anecdotes about wild youth. Just a blank space, neatly filled with the narrative of their meeting and immediate settling down. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? They were just my parents. Everyone has gaps in their stories, right? Now, those gaps were gaping chasms, filled with the shadows of their criminal past. I thought about their aversion to certain topics. They never liked true crime documentaries. My dad would always change the channel if anything about prison or law enforcement came on, claiming it was too depressing or too violent. My mom would get visibly uncomfortable if anyone talked about past mistakes or regrets. I attributed it to their gentle natures, their desire for peace. Now I saw it as a desperate attempt to avoid any trigger, any reminder of the life they had so meticulously buried. The emotional toll of this discovery was immense. I felt a profound sense of loss, as if the parents I had known and loved had died and been replaced by strangers. The betrayal was a constant ache in my chest. How could they have done this to me? To themselves? To the victims of their crimes? The anger was a slow burn, fueled by every new detail I uncovered. It wasn't just about the crimes themselves, but about the decades of lies, the carefully constructed facade. I also wrestled with a deep sense of shame. Not for anything I had done, but for their actions. It was an irrational feeling, I knew, but it was there nonetheless. The thought that my parents, the people who gave me life, were once headline news for violent offenses, was deeply unsettling. It made me question everything about my own identity. If they were capable of such deception, what did that say about me? Was there a predisposition, a hidden darkness in my own bloodline? These thoughts were terrifying, intrusive, and relentless. I considered confronting them. Many times. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, imagining their reactions. Denial? Anger? A tearful confession? But each time I hesitated. What would it achieve? Would it bring me peace? Or would it simply shatter the fragile peace we still maintained? Even if it was built on a lie? The thought of seeing the shame in their eyes, or worse, the anger, was almost unbearable. They were older now, in their late 60s. What good would it do to drag up decades-old trauma? To force them to relive a past they had clearly worked so hard to escape? The more I thought about it, the more complex it became. If I confronted them, I would be forcing them to acknowledge a part of themselves they had clearly tried to bury. And what if they denied it? What if they tried to lie again? I had the police records. I had the newspaper clippings. Their denials would be futile, and the confrontation would be even more painful. And then what? Do I cut them out of my life? Do I forgive them? Do I understand? The questions spiraled, each one leading to more uncertainty. I started to look at my parents through a different lens. I observed them, searching for clues, for tells, for anything that would confirm the dark figures in the mugshots were indeed the same people sitting across from me at the dinner table. My father, who now spent his days gardening and doting on his grandchildren, still had a certain intensity in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. My mother, who baked cookies and knitted sweaters, sometimes had a distant look, a quiet sadness that I had always attributed to the natural melancholies of aging. Now I wondered if it was the weight of their secret, a shadow that never truly left them. I also began to wonder about their rehabilitation. They had served their time. They had, seemingly, turned their lives around. They were respected in their community, beloved by their family. Was it possible to truly atone for such a past? To become entirely different people? Or was the past always a part of them, merely dormant, waiting to be discovered? It was a profound philosophical dilemma, one that I, their child, was now forced to grapple with. The realization that they had chosen to protect me from this truth, even if it meant living a lie, was a double-edged sword. On one hand, I understood their desire to shield me from their mistakes, to give me a normal, untainted childhood. On the other hand, that protection came at the cost of honesty, at the cost of me truly knowing who they were. And that felt like a profound betrayal. It was a secret kept for decades, a secret that shaped my entire perception of my family, and by extension myself. I considered sharing this with my spouse, with a close friend. But the shame, the fear of judgment, held me back. How do you tell someone that your seemingly perfect, loving parents were once violent criminals? How do you explain the seismic shift in your own understanding of reality? It felt too personal, too raw, too dangerous to share. This burden for now felt like mine alone to carry. The folder remains hidden in my house now, a constant reminder of the truth. Sometimes I take it out, just to look at the documents, to reread the articles, to confirm that it wasn't a dream, a delusion. Each time, the same wave of disbelief and sorrow washes over me. My parents, the people I thought I knew, are gone, replaced by these complex, flawed, and deeply secretive individuals. And I, their child, am left to reconcile the two versions of them. This journey has forced me to reevaluate everything. What does family truly mean? Is it blood, or is it the shared experiences, the trust, the honesty? Can you truly forgive someone for a secret they never confessed? Can you love someone fully when you know such a profound truth about their past? I don't have all the answers. I am still living with the weight of this discovery, navigating the turbulent waters of my own emotions. My parents hid a criminal past. They served their time. They rebuilt their lives. And they kept it a secret from me for my entire life. I found the police records. And now, my world will never be the same. The truth is a powerful, often destructive force. It can shatter illusions, dismantle foundations, and leave you grappling with a reality far darker and more complicated than you ever imagined. This is my reality now. This is the secret I carry. If you've ever found yourself uncovering a shocking family secret, something that turned your world upside down, I want to hear your story. Sharing these burdens, even anonymously, can be a powerful way to process them. So, please, if you connected with this story, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more revelations and untold truths, and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, or if you've had your own experience with a family secret. Your support means the world as I navigate this incredibly complex and painful chapter of my life. Thank you for listening.